Good morning and welcome to the global series of in-market updates for the Department of Trade and Investment. My name is Belinda Redmond and I'll be your host today. I'm the Director of State Promotions for the Department, and this is the beginning of a series of webinars to help you navigate the global business. I want to outline how today's session will work before I introduce you to the Minister for Trade and Investment, the Honourable David Ridgway. We will be filming the session and we will upload all the sessions onto our website for future reference. You will have an opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar session. There is a Q&A function on your screen. Just type your question in. We probably won't get to all questions, unfortunately, but we will collate all questions and put them up on the website. I will then introduce you to Sally Townsend, who is our South Australian representative in Japan. Due to time constraints, not every question will be answered, but we will do our best to get to all of them. At the end of the session, there'll also be a short poll to assist us in preparing for better sessions in the future. If you could fill out the poll, we'd appreciate it. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the Honourable David Ridgway, the Minister for Trade and Investment.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here, and thanks you all for coming and participating. And as we know, right now we're facing some unprecedented challenges in our business community, both here and around the globe, with this COVID-19 pandemic. And it's particularly challenging. As you're all aware, the state government has announced $1 billion package of stimulus and other supports for business. And of course, yesterday, Prime Minister Morrison and Treasurer Frydenberg announced the third tranche of packages that they've announced, bringing it up to $320 billion of support. So, we've got unprecedented government support happening, on the ground at the moment. But what we're hoping to do with these webinars is to give you exporters and business people an opportunity to listen and hear from our in-market representatives. And of course, we have Sally Townsend today to be able to give you a bit of an update on what's happening in Japan and some of our other countries over coming days, and also give you a chance to ask some questions, because really it's a difficult time because we're all feeling a little disjointed and disconnected. And this new technology might be a little bit clunky to start with, but I'm sure we'll obviously get much more familiar with it. So, the initial focus will be on understanding the impacts of exporters getting their goods to market and the sort of supply chains and the problems in the supply chains. And of course, we've got we'll look to try and make sure we answer your questions. And we've also got on our website of business.sa.gov.au a whole range of information around our state government stimulus and also the federal government stimulus. So it is important that we try and get this information to you. We're keen to get feedback from you. And so I hope you find today's presentation useful and insightful. And I'll now hand over to Sally Townsend in Japan.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sally Townsend, and I'm the State Representative for Northeast Asia based in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much for joining me for this webinar this morning in my living room, like I imagine you all are. I'd like to give you a snapshot of the current mood in Japan, how the market is dealing with COVID-19, what the issues are, how daily life has been affected, what consumer confidence is like now, which industries have taken a big hit, and some advice for you if you're in market or preparing to enter market, and how to prepare for when this is all over. So the current mood of the market in Japan is we've moved from self-restraint to waiting for lockdown. So we're on edge. It's quite an anxious atmosphere. There are a lot of rumours swirling. In Japan, the government cannot lock down cities. They can only strongly request citizens to stay home and businesses to close. But once the Prime Minister does that, the large corporates will then immediately act on his direction and all trickle down from there. So what are we seeing? We've experienced waves of panic buying, first when schools were closed a couple of weeks ago, and it started with rumours again that we'll see a Tokyo lockdown from April 1st, which is the beginning of the new financial year here. There's been a reduction in consumer spending, primarily in services. Department and apparel store sales are struggling, and hotels and high-end restaurants and obviously associated businesses have been significantly affected with the lack of tourists. and work travel, etc. And this will continue with the Olympics having been postponed until next year as well. We had a semi-lockdown in Tokyo this weekend. That meant over 500 Starbucks closed and over 700 family restaurants, Gusto family restaurants closed. That's just to give you a bit of a scale of what that means. Amusement parks have closed, large parks have closed, museums and galleries too. What is the government doing about this? We'll see the introduction of the largest stimulus package to date, over 800 billion American dollars, around 10% of GDP. They're easing mortgage payments. Cash will be directed to households as well. And they're also subsidising big companies with idle manufacturing plants, such as Toyota, to ramp up medical supply production. So how is the public safety and confidence in Japan? Japanese are typically price-conscious shoppers, and of course, they've become more conservative here too. So consumers are not seeking high-end products given uncertainty around the future. There's industry uncertainty. Groups such as the Japan Medical Association have called for stricter messaging from the government. Mizuho Bank has said not to be complacent. However, this cautionary, anxious mood gives us a chance to capitalise on our unique position here, and that is the longevity and strength of the Japan-Australia relationship. So the strength of your relationships with your business partners in Japan and our reputation for producing high-quality, safe goods will really, really do us a lot of favours here when this all calms down. But more about this later. So what is functioning? Supermarkets are continuing to do well with coronavirus. Staple food and food destined for retail sale is in high demand. Processed food, rice, frozen meals and meats. So now convenience and shelf stability are more prioritised over health consciousness or premium quality, which are actually the key strengths and the unique value of most Australian food products. Online retail is flourishing. There's a large increase in online shopping, particularly for fresh food. Consumers are still buying wine online, for example, but less expensive bottles. They're reluctant to spend on so-called luxury items. Restrictions on restaurant dining, congregating in groups and travel have significantly reduced the demand for premium agricultural products. But some high-end restaurants are introducing takeout and lunchbox meals, and some suppliers who have only ever supplied their products directly to trade are branching out to consumers online now. Is freight functioning? There is substantial stress on logistics and supply chain networks, obviously. So products relying on air freight have been most affected in the immediate term. Air cargo shipments usually used for high-value, low-volume products. Obviously, these have been affected. Products mainly destined for premium food services. So this is certainly an impact, but this has been countered by a significant decline in demand for premium Australian product. The impact on sea freight has been less acute. If you do send by sea, there may be concern that staff shortages due to shutdowns in South Australia may impact supply of your product. So make sure to keep in touch with your importer and keep them up to date. And I'll touch on this later too. And from this week, only ANA passenger flights will come to Japan, and it might only be one flight per day. Accordingly, freight costs have increased due to the reduction in flights too. But I do believe there may be some news on the horizon with special allowances for chilled air freight from Australia to Japan for seafood. So the Japanese government seems to be concentrating air freight into Narita, which is Tokyo's main international airport, and as a result, the customs clearance process appears to be busy and causing a bit of a bottleneck at the moment. So at the rate, air freight conditions are constantly changing, so importers are needing to check flight schedules every few hours. And another point about the situation here that is causing a little bit of issue with freight conditions and so on is telework. And telework is is playing a part in this slowdown. Many companies have asked their staff to work from home and not meet people outside, and Japan's business culture is all about face-to-face meetings and going directly, meeting with their customers and suppliers and so forth. So teleworking and video conferencing, for example, is something they're not used to. So this is causing a little bit of a slowdown too. So what you need to do now, if you are in market, please stay in touch with your importer or customer. Find out what their concerns are. Let them know your situation, ask about theirs, keep them up to date with your production, any issues you may have, how you can help them, and this is important for preparing for the recovery as well. And are you having difficulty getting in touch with your importer or customer? So they may be experiencing a number of difficulties, and it may not be able they may not be able to talk with you or let you know until they really know what's going on. So check in with your importer, continue to stay in close contact with them, acknowledge that their priorities may be elsewhere, and ask us to reach out to them, because sometimes it just helps for a third party to talk with them in their own language. So if you're trying to enter market or you're mid-negotiation and all this is blown up, don't despair, because some buyers are still looking for long-lasting businesses rather than emergency needs. Obviously, this isn't going to be forever. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and they'll have to satisfy demands and still stock their shops once all of this stuff is calmed down. So if they're not responding, that does not necessarily mean they're not interested. They're just not in a position to think about new partnerships or products right at the moment. And consumer demands and the way they buy goods and the way we trade are going to change. So what you are offering or introducing could suit the new way of trade here and the different demands that come up. So preparing for recovery. Depending on the sector, get ready for inbound missions. Postponed trips will be on as soon as flights are. And we've been in touch with a number of people here who are really eager to get over to Australia or South Australia as soon as they can. Japanese companies will typically honour contract conditions throughout the duration of the contract, that expect the current higher freight prices, for example, to be reflected in changes in conditions upon contract renewal. Get ready to visit your importer or customers in market. Your support is invaluable to them, and this is where we go back to the point on the relationship strength, and this is something that you really need to consider once all this dies down. You're coming to market and showing your support for your importer customer will be highly appreciated. And be ready for a market that has possibly changed quite a lot. The way it trades and invests will be different. So we have to work out now how we can leverage these kinds of changes in the new sales platforms. So how can we help you? Our team here is my colleague, Michael Suzuki, who's listening now, I hope, and me. And we are here to help you, give you updates, and we can contact your partners here. So please let us know. We're staying closely in touch with key importers and wholesalers here. We've been speaking to them directly. We had a roundtable discussion recently to find out what exactly the issues are on the ground, what they're experiencing, and we've sent out a survey this week to find out what's going on in our greater community as well. We're continuing to watch consumer patterns and changing demands and see where we think there may be opportunities for South Australian companies. And we're planning a number of events throughout the year. Our Tasting South Australia trade launch will be in May, June, with our follow-up grand event in November, where we will bring South Australia to Tokyo that trade and consumers can experience, where we will offer experiences from education to wine tourism. So thank you very much for listening, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Sally. A couple of questions that have come through. What can the Tokyo office do to help me connect with new buyers, importers, distributors at this time?
Thanks, Belinda. Well, we're still here, so we'd like to keep in touch with people who still want to enter the market. There's still opportunities here, so please get in touch with us and we'll talk with you, the person who wants to enter the market, and work out where we see opportunities. But definitely please keep in touch with us.
A second question for Minister Ridgway. As a small business person, what can I do to keep my export business going?
Well, certainly I think you need to have a look at some of the things that have been offered by the federal government and also the state government, but then look at, from an export point of view, Sally, all of our freight, road and sea freight is still operating. Air freight is somewhat challenging, but I think Sally alluded to potentially some things changing there in the short to medium term. And we have got some limited air freight out of Melbourne at the moment, and we've got a freight plane that flies from Adelaide to Melbourne. So I'm not sure what your small business is, but certainly have a look at what's on offer. It is difficult and challenging times, but and if it's an air freight issue, we're working through some of those issues at the moment.
Thank you. A question now for Sally. Are there any new opportunities emerging out of this crisis?
Thanks, Belinda. I think there are, and I think what we're seeing with all of this online sales, regularly Japanese consumers weren't really purchasing their supermarket products or fresh products online. So we're seeing a number of changes, and I really think this is where we can capitalise on by having items that are ready to be sold on that platform.
Thank you. Another question. In Japan and other countries, by undertaking market visits and exhibiting trade shows to meet potential new customers, how can this be done during this period when we normally identify potential customers via methods such as attending a trade show?
I think, and this is something that I often advise people to do, is obviously contact us, but to go online and have a look at where you see your product. So, for example, if it's a wine trade show, have a look. We can give you a number of websites, for example, that import Australia with importers of Australian wine in Japan or wine in Japan in general, and have a look through at where you would see your wine in that importer's portfolio, for example. I think that's always a good way to do it. And then we can have a look at what you've chosen and then give some advice from there as well. But that's always a good way. Just Google wine importers, so wine's the example, wine importers Japan, and have a look. And some might look like that's a good site, that's where I could imagine my wine, that's somewhere that I might like to approach, and then we can give some advice from there.
Thank you. Another question for Sally from Adriana. Hello, Sally. Big thank you so much for all the information. Our market is mainly comprised of schools. Do you anticipate at-home learning to remain, or how do you anticipate schools to operate through this pandemic?
That's a really good question, and thank you, Adriana. And I think you may know that we did have a big Education Australia event planned here in May that has been cancelled, and we're looking at webinars and using an online platform. And this is something, again, that is kind of unfamiliar to the Japanese audience, but it's something that if we can make it easy and fun and interesting, something that they will take on. So this is what we're looking at here at the moment.
Thank you. And one final question from Laura. Again, hi, Sally. Thank you for a great presentation and all that you do for Japan-South Australian relations. How cautious do you think Japanese companies are likely to be in coming months in working with overseas companies given the global economic instability?
Thank you. Hi, Laura. Thank you for your question. I think they'll be very cautious in that they will look for their friends in the community. So this is again where this Australia and Japan relationship is just so important. They'll look at what they know and they'll look at where they've worked before, and this is where we can really capitalise on, where we have that strength over our competitors. We've got such a long relationship with Japan. We've got probably the best relationship that we have now. We had a number of senior Japanese executives visit Australia in February this year, and we'll have 100 odd of them visiting Adelaide in October for the Australia-Japan Economic Cooperation Committee Joint Conference in October, the 18th, I think. So that really shows the strength of our relationships, and I think that will definitely come into play here. The Japanese will go to what they know.
Thank you. And one final question for the Minister. Minister, how long do you think it'll take for businesses to bounce back after the pandemic, for example, airlines?
Well, that depends, I guess, on what happens in their countries. We expect, and interstate even, the airlines, so really it's a bit hard to tell, but I expect as soon as those countries are under control, then we'll start to see some airlines starting to fly again. But it's certainly nowhere near under control at the moment. So it's a little bit hard to say, and it also depends on business traffic, passenger traffic. So I'd say that's a question that is almost a little bit too hard to give a definite answer to. But business will want to be getting back. As Sally said, there's a lot of businesses want to get down here. So I think once things stabilise and the pandemic's over, I think we'll see travel and business travel come back reasonably strongly. But it's a little uncertain, and we've got some great results here in South Australia at the moment. Only 6 new cases yesterday, but other countries sadly are not travelling as well as us, so it'll take a little time.
Thank you. And that's our final wrap-up. Minister, would you like to close us off for today?
Yes, certainly. I mean, thank you everybody for coming online. It's been really a pleasure to have this as our first one. We've got a couple more. I think we've got the US at 9 o'clock tomorrow and Malaysia at 11:30. So if you're interested, please log in again. And in these tough times, take care, stay safe, and keep socially distancing yourself. And I hope we'll see you all online again tomorrow or in the near future. Thank you very much.